During an emergency, seconds matter. Use the free Smart 911 app to provide vital information to first responders.
Dispatchers will see your address, medical information, and details about your home and pets. Your information is displayed to dispatchers only when a registered phone number calls 911.
You control what information you share.
Protect your loved ones. Plan ahead.
It can make all the difference to keep your family safe.
September is National Preparedness Month. Don't wait, be ready today.
Good Thursday afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maddie Jansen, and today we're talking about being ready in case of a power outage. September is National Preparedness Month, and it's something fresh on the minds of many in our community in the face of the July earthquakes especially. Today, we'll be joined by several experts to talk about making sure your family is ready. Power outages could happen in the face of many different events, such as natural disasters, an earthquake, a fire, even an accident, or because of recently implemented public safety power shutoff programs. So it's best to be ready. First up, we're talking to Miranda Collard, public health nurse, and we're going to be talking about what to do if you are relying on electricity for medical needs. Miranda, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. We appreciate it. Okay, so first we want to talk about medications. We don't often think about that. We think about what happens if our food goes bad. Let's talk about medications. Is that something that could also be affected if the power were to go off and stay off for a certain amount of time?
Yes, there are certain individuals who have medications that have to be refrigerated, such as diabetics. So it's important that beforehand they make sure they have some styrofoam ice chests that are in their home, maybe some bubble wrap with ice packs. In case the power goes out, they can throw the medications in there. Also, it's important for them to call the manufacturers of all their medications and ask how long the medications can be out of refrigerator temperature range, which is usually 36 to 46. So some insulin can stay out for 30 days from the refrigerator. So it just depends on what the manufacturer recommends.
Okay, so if you are on one of these medications that's long-term, that's something you should probably go do now is call all of them and find out the guidelines.
Yes, and the pharmacist will also probably be able to tell them that.
Okay, and so if the power goes off, do you immediately grab your medications and throw them in a styrofoam container, or should you kind of wait and see how long it's going to last?
I think that refrigerators will hold temp without being opened for a couple hours. Okay. So you can wait. Probably after 4 hours, you should start putting them in the ice chest with the ice packs.
Okay. And what about people who are dependent upon electrical powered medical equipment?
So for those individuals, some of them have portable machines that they can take with them, like oxygen, or even people who are ventilator dependent that they use when they go on car rides. So they can use those. For more long-term power outages, they should probably purchase a generator and learn how to use it and have it installed correctly so they can use that long-term. Also, they do need to contact their power supplier and let them know that they have medical equipment that requires electricity, so they can be on their list to check on them first or restore their power first.
And that was something I kind of saw going through all of these emergency preparedness tips, is that if you haven't updated your contact information with your power supplier currently, you probably should do that now.
Yes.
Whether or not you rely on medical equipment.
Yes, and PG&E has this medical baseline program that they use, and once you get enrolled in that, they know that you're on life-saving equipment that you're going to need, so they're more aware of your circumstances.
But right now, you should probably look into a generator if you are dependent on something like that?
Right.
Okay.
You should have one available and know how to use it.
Okay. And so in terms of like a long-term power outage, a longer-term, more massive natural disaster, we could be looking at pharmacies being shut down.
Right.
So what should you do in that case now, planning-wise?
For the medication, sometimes primary care doctors can give the patient some samples of their medication and they can keep on hand to put in their emergency bag. There's also the option now to get your prescriptions delivered through the mail to you, which would be a great idea because I know that the Postal Service will be operating during power outages. And also, you can always get your prescriptions transferred in from to a different pharmacy that's maybe not closed or maybe out of the city. And I know when the patients go to shelters or the clients go to shelters, the medical staff is always figuring out how to get their medication to them.
Okay, so kind of be alert for those emergency contacts and those shelters who are going to be open during that time.
Right, and always have the list of your medications and their dosages,
Okay.
which a lot of people don't know.
Yeah, so you want to keep that handy somewhere as well. Okay, and is this something that you want to make sure you have extra supply on hand further than those samples, or is that kind of getting into dangerous territory?
Usually you could have a couple days worth of medications. I know that not a lot of insurance companies will pay for you to have a full another month on hand, but your doctor can prescribe, you know, maybe a different type, so you could have that one on hand as well in case that one runs out.
So make sure you have those phone numbers available as well to get a hold of your doctor, even if it's an off time or something like that.
Yes.
Any other tips that you want to give out for people who have these medical concerns in case of an emergency or a power outage like this?
I think it's important to have a good support network, and all of your family and your friends need to know if you're on life-saving devices or, you know, ventilator dependent, or you have medications. You need to have them around you, so if you can go to their home or they can take you somewhere where there is electricity. I think the support system is probably one of the most important things to have.
All right, Miranda Collard with Kern County Public Health, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We really appreciate it. And coming up, we're going to be talking a little bit more about issues impacting the elderly in our community when it comes to power outages. We'll be right back.
No one can predict when disasters will occur or what the impact would be to you and your family. Think about what supplies you will need to keep your family safe and well. Plan where to reunite and how to communicate if local phone lines aren't working. Make sure your family knows what to do. Take control of what you can do to build your family's ability to survive a disaster event. Don't wait, be prepared.
September is National Preparedness Month. Don't wait, be ready today.
And welcome back. Again, we're talking about preparedness and what to do in the case of a power outage. September is National Preparedness Month. It's something on the minds of many in our community with recent disasters such as the earthquakes in July, but also because of the recently implemented Public Safety Power Shutoff Program. We know that power outages can happen, but what do we need to do now to make sure our families are going to be safe, especially when we're thinking about our elderly family members, or if you yourself are older, if this is something you should be thinking about as well right now. Joining us, Jeremy Oliver with Aging and Adult Services, who's going to talk about some of the things that you should do right now before a disaster strikes. Thank you so much for joining us, Jeremy. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, so let's talk about, first off, something we are not, completely familiar with at all here in the Central Valley, the heat. It doesn't take a power outage or anything like that for that to be of concern, but if there were a power outage in the midst of a heat wave, it's even more concerning.
Correct. So a lot of people may not necessarily think about more sensitive groups. So we have a lot of seniors, even some children that are, when the heat rises, they're more sensitive to that aspect and higher risk. So you always want to watch for any signs, symptoms that could cause you to be showing signs of dehydration or just fatigue with regards to the heat itself.
What are those signs that we should be looking for?
Sure. So dizziness, vomiting, nausea, anything that might cause you confusion or increase confusion during that time frame. You just want to make sure that the person is being well hydrated and being watched during that time frame.
If your power is off for a certain amount of time and we have these really high temperatures, should people be staying at home? Should they call to get out of their house if they can't do it themselves, or just go ahead and leave?
Sure. So depending on the person, they may already have a good support network and friends and family that will help them in that regard. But if they're independent and they know that they are at risk, the county does operate cooling centers throughout the county. There's about 16 that are operational. And on the day of that, they may also want to contact our office to see if it is open and available.
Okay.
Typically, they open between 1 to 8 p.m.
Okay, because we know the cooling centers, those all vary on when they open. It depends on the temperature. It has to reach, I believe, 105 here in the valley, and that has to be a predicted temperature the day before. So, it's kind of iffy. If you get a 103-degree day outside and your power's off for several hours, you could be in dire straits.
Definitely. So yeah, and the opportunity to look for other areas that do have power, or sometimes going shopping, if you know that is going to have a spot that has power, that's a good opportunity to get into a cooler climate.
Let's talk about something that I didn't even think about before we were preparing for this, being able to open your garage door in case of a power outage.
Right. A lot of people are so dependent upon power to do everything, and it assists with garage doors opening automatically, gates automatically opening. So when the power goes out, have you tested those devices? Have you made sure that they are accessible, that you can get in and out safely, and that you have the physical ability to actually manipulate that particular device?
And really, it just comes down to thinking about this ahead of time.
Correct. I would encourage people to test the shutoffs now while they have that opportunity to see if they can really do it. If they're at risk or they know they can't do it, do they have a backup plan? Do they have a contact person, somebody that will assist them when that issue comes up?
It's important to have those close contacts, not just family who maybe lives across town or even out of town, but you need to have people in your close proximity, right?
Exactly. That's one of the things we try to encourage a lot of neighbors. If you do know you've got somebody that lives next to you that has these needs, can you check on them? Can you verify that they are okay? Are they that kind of a friend that you would say, yeah, I can check and see that everything is going okay for them?
Okay. Let's talk about general preparedness as well. What other things that we don't think about are going to come into play if we have a power outage that goes on for a while?
Right. So I think a lot of people don't necessarily prepare for having the extra batteries, extra food, at least a week's worth of food that is non-perishable, that you don't have to worry about being cool, that you can prepare it easily too. So it's something that if you can't get your oven is electrical, do you have alternative ways to get that heated without using power? Propane? Do you have a natural amount of gas? Is your vehicle going to have enough fuel, right? In the event of power being out, fuel stations will probably not be operational. Do you keep enough fuel in your car, or do you buy backup cans to make sure that you're ready?
That was something I didn't really think about, and in the midst of all the earthquakes a few months ago, my mom, who went through Hurricane Harvey in Houston, told me that. She said, you want to make sure you have enough gas in your car right now, because I always let mine run low. And also, think about, what are you going to do cash-wise if the ATMs aren't working for a long period of time?
Yes, excellent point. Having your documents ready in the event of an emergency as well. So your ID, your credit cards, they may not be operational, so you will need cash, and having an adequate supply that will be able to be utilized.
And we talk about making sure we have enough food for a whole week. That's got to include your pets too.
Exactly. So those pets, especially if it's a service pet or any of those other types of animals that you do rely on. I mean, everybody relies on their pets. Everybody's happy to have their pets around. You want to obviously keep enough food for them as well when you're considering this emergency issue.
And when it comes down to our phones, we are all dependent so much now on our smartphones and our devices. If the power goes out, you're not going to be able to charge those. So
right.
What then?
So a lot of people do have their vehicles as an alternative way of charging their phones and devices if you have the adequate cords. But you also want to look for those charging little charging stations that you can buy, and they restore and just keep them charged and periodically make sure that they are fully charged in the event of any issues.
Okay, so those are just, they stand alone, and then you can plug your phone into one of those?
Exactly. So you can buy the devices at a lot of different stores now. You can see really small ones that people carry in their purses, but you have even larger ones that will last a couple of days, or even have solar options that will charge in the event of power being out. It can recharge off of the sun, and then you can charge your device off of that.
We've talked a little bit about getting a generator to have in case. And I know that those comes with some safety concerns as well. It's great to have that backup, but there are some things you really want to be careful of if you do have and then use that generator, right?
Yes, exactly. So depending on the type of generator you have, if it's using fuel, number one, you want to make sure you have fuel for it. Number two, is it in a safe spot where it won't cause you to be carbon monoxide poisoning, where you can actually die from generating that power in your home. So keeping it a safe distance from your home, and it doesn't impact somebody else around you. Making sure you have that cord that will run that distance safely and doesn't cause you to trip or fall. So making sure you have all these little extra pieces in place that will really keep you safe.
And that needs to be outside of your home, away from your home, not in like a garage that's closed up.
No,
or
nothing closed
like
up. That would just build up that carbon monoxide.
And we've heard of instances like that where unfortunately someone survives a natural disaster but then dies because of carbon monoxide poisoning. So it's just incredibly tragic and something you would like to think about now instead of when it happens. And we have a question coming in from someone online, and they're talking about medical equipment that needs electricity like we were talking about a few minutes ago. What do you need to do to plan for in case of a power outage if you have something like that?
Yeah, so great question with regards to that. Depending on your medical equipment, some of them are battery powered, and so you do have that battery that backup ability. Some people will have oxygen tanks as well as kind of a backup. But talking to your medical providers themselves and saying, if I needed a few more days, what would be the best option I would really want to go forward with this particular device? Some people have powered electric wheelchairs, so it's always good to have the actual manual wheelchair as well available, so that if you're not able to charge your electric wheelchair, you can at least use the manual chair.
And so say we get into a case where you're in a several-day power outage and you are kind of stuck now because you have an electric wheelchair, and even if your battery has run out on it or something like that, what should you do?
So depending on your circumstances, you may definitely contact other agencies such as our agency for some additional assistance. We might be able to go out, see if there's other alternatives to get you up and moving again. Obviously, if it's a critical emergency, call 911. But if it's a non-life threatening, you may contact our office for additional supports.
And someone else is asking, what should you do if you have multiple pets to worry about?
Yeah, you have to plan for each of your pets as if they're single. So buying whatever case of supplies will actually last them that whole time frame that you're anticipating, and an emergency may occur.
And, we kind of went through this process in our house a few months ago, and you also want to go through those supplies every few months and maybe pull them out, use them, and replace them so that you always have some there, but they're also not getting too old.
That's exactly the next part of that, is making sure you have a fresh supply, that it isn't something that's old. Same thing with your batteries. If you never use those batteries, eventually they will expire, making sure you've got new ones and kind of run through a stockpiling system.
Any other tips that you'd like to give out for those people out there?
No, just being prepared in advance is going to save you a lot of heartache down the road. So anything you can do now is definitely going to help.
Yeah, it seems like we forget so quickly after natural disasters. We're all gung-ho for a few weeks, it seems, but then we kind of forget about it and let it go by the wayside until another one happens. So it's best to think about it now. September, again, is National Preparedness Month, and that's why we want you to be prepared. Coming up after this, we're going to talk about food and water safety in the case of a power shutoff. We'll be right back.
My independence is important to me. I'm going to be prepared.
I may need a little extra time if I have to leave my home. I'm going to be prepared.
No one knows his needs better than we do.
We are going to be prepared.
I have a disaster plan, and I have an emergency kit, and I'm going to be prepared.
Disaster preparedness is for everyone. Help keep your independence in time of a disaster. Prepare today.
Welcome back. Joining us now is Amy Rutledge with Environmental Health. If you're just joining us, we're talking about National Preparedness Month, what to do in case of a power outage. We're spending this entire month and talking about different topics to make sure that you and your family are prepared in case of any sort of an emergency or even just a pre-planned public safety power outage now that those have been implemented across our state. So again, we are going to talk about food and water safety. This is probably the top question that people have when it comes to a power outage.
Yeah,
no, don't open the fridge. How long is my food going to be safe, right?
Yeah, that's one of them, and I think oftentimes people kind of overlook it because they think, the power's going to come right back on, because that's usually their experience. But in a power safety shutoff or in a long-term disaster, that's not going to be the case. It's going to be 24 hours, a couple days, just depends. So it's really important that people understand how to keep their food cold. That's going to prevent them from getting sick and ill, because you don't want that on top of a natural disaster. You've just been through a traumatic experience and now you're sick. Nobody wants that. So in a refrigerator, if the power goes out, you can keep that food cold for up to 4 hours in the refrigerator, up to 48 hours if it is frozen. So you have that time to at least start working out a plan, but that's, again, you want to be prepared. So you want to make sure you know what those alternate means are to actually keep your food cold. So you want to know where you can buy block ice or bagged ice or dry ice, so that as you start preparing for those long-term outages, you can move that food and transfer it into ice chest or another storage means that's going to keep it insulated, and add those other means to keep it cooled, so that you at least have that perishable food supply that maybe you can exhaust over the next few days if you can actually cook it.
So 4 hours, that's the cutoff in a refrigerator?
4 hours in a refrigerator. Really? So it's really important that you also have a thermometer in the refrigerator, not a digital one that you have on the outside. You want one that you can read. So you can look at that and you can see once that temperature starts creeping up. And it doesn't take long, especially in this hot weather, for that temperature to go from a nice comfortable 38, which is great at keeping your food safe, to 50, and now you're starting to get into that bacterial growth that gets people sick. Yes.
Okay, so once it's been out for 4 hours, you're getting into a danger zone and you need to check the temperature.
Yeah, anything over about 45 degrees, you start getting into what we call the danger zone.
Okay.
And if you're creeping up into those areas, especially once you start getting to room temperature, that is when the bacteria starts to grow, and that is when you'll get sick from eating that food.
Wow. Okay, that does seem to happen really fast. Can you use any type of thermometer to stick in and test your refrigerator?
Yeah, so there are all different kinds. There are digital ones. There are small refrigerator ones you can buy at the grocery store. Some hang, some sit in there, and it'll give you a good indication of what the temperature is like at that first moment that you notice an outage, and then as it starts to prolong. So you do want to keep it closed as much as possible, but if it starts to get to that 4 hour mark, crack it open, see what the temperature is, and then you'll know if you need to transfer it or if you maybe have a little bit more time.
Get a game plan going.
Correct.
And styrofoam ice chests, those are good things to keep on hand, right?
Styrofoam ice chest, insulated bags, a lot of the grocery stores offer those now for your cold food. Anything that you can get that's going to keep the cold in is going to at least help prolong the life of that food.
Okay, but you definitely want to be watching that because we don't want people to get sick on top of everything else going on.
Correct.
Talk about water safety. I don't think you think about that one.
And I think that's the one that most people overlook when it comes to water safety. We turn on the tap and the water's there and it's great. Unless you have some really rough iron buildup, when you turn it on, it's going to look just like water normally does. So you're not going to see if there's any contamination associated with that. But in a power outage, those water systems can go down. So just like, you use and depend on power in your home, all of our water treatment plants also depend on power to operate our pumps and our treatment systems. So when the power goes down, especially if it's long term, they may not have a generator to sustain that supply. So you could be looking at no water coming out of your tap, and if you do have water coming out of your tap, depending upon how long they may have been out, you could have contamination that you can't actually see. So it's really important to monitor news channels because when those come out, you might get what's called a boil water notice or a do not drink notice, and those are associated with the bacterial contamination that can occur during a disaster or a power outage.
And are you okay to just drink your water otherwise during a power outage?
So it really depends. That's why you really need to listen. Sometimes the power doesn't affect the system. So they're really looking at potentials for contaminations. When the power goes out, you can get what they call back siphonage into the system. So basically all the water rushes back into the treatment plant and then comes back out, and you don't know what it's collected along the way. So they take the utmost precaution to make sure people are safe. During Erskine and that fire, the water systems actually went down completely. So there was no water, and there may have been some pressure in the lines, but we don't know what happened to that during that interim time, from the time it went from the power outage to the time you actually turned the tap on. So the water companies are always going to be cautious, listen to the news. Our department will be out there letting people know if there has been those issues, because we want to make sure everyone remains safe for the same reason. You don't want to get sick during a time of disaster.
So someone has a question, what about water bottles that have been left in hot cars? Are you okay to drink those?
So in terms of water bottles, you should have an extra supply of water, of drinking water. It's 1 gallon per person per day for drinking, and then another gallon for your hygiene purposes. That's like the bare minimum that everybody should have. So 2 gallons
per person per day for like about a week you want to have for your household?
You should have at least 3 days, because in a disaster, it's going to take a few days for all the resources to get up and running and to actually get out there to help you. So at least 3 days. If you can have more, that's great. There are alternative water supplies available. If it was me and that was all I had to drink, I would drink the water bottle from the hot car. There are also other means that you can resort to first. So a hot water heater holds 30 to 60 gallons as long as you cut that off at the time that the power goes off. So you could drain that and you can treat it, and you could actually use that an alternative drinking source.
How would you treat it?
So you can treat that a couple of different ways. The easiest one for most people, and depending upon the situation, is going to be either bringing it to a rolling boil for 1 minute. That's going to kill any bacterial contamination that may have come into contact with the water. Or you can actually treat it with household bleach. So if you're going to treat it with household bleach, you want to make sure it's not scented, it doesn't have any perfumes, any dyes, just plain household bleach. 5% is the best, which is what most Clorox and other brands are. And then you're going to add 1/8 of a teaspoon to every gallon of water that you treat.
Oh, wow.
You'll let it sit for 30 minutes, and then it's good to go.
Wow. Okay.
And again, that's for your bacterial contamination, which is usually what people are most concerned about.
Okay, 1/8 of a teaspoon
per
gallon.
Teaspoon
Wait
per
30
gallon.
minutes. Okay, because if your power's off, you're probably not going to be able to do the rolling boil. So
especially
it's
if
good to know that trick there.
Yeah, especially if you have electric starts or you just have an electric stovetop.
Okay.
You're not going to be able to boil anything.
Okay.
So you do have those alternative means. And then if you're an avid outdoorsman, you may have those water purification tablets or things like that. Those are all acceptable means to treat your water.
Okay. Another question someone had thinking about their food, and this is even just a general food safety question. What about those dates on your food? Are they just suggestions? Are they, hard, fast rules?
So most of the dates on food products are going to be best by dates. So best by dates really just have to do with quality of the product. So the quality degrades, might not taste the same, the texture may change. There are some use by dates that are on products. Those are really intended to be used by that, because after that you may have bacterial growth that becomes extreme that can make people sick. So it's really important to look at how they're labeled, if it's used by or if it's best by.
Okay. Let's talk about well water as well. If you're on a well, what kind of issues do you face in the case of a power outage?
So wells are pretty similar to a public water system, which is what most people are on, except you're going to be in control of everything as opposed to someone else, and you're just the end recipient. So it's really important, if you have a well, that you know how deep it is and how big your casing is, because you can apply those same disinfection techniques that you do for a gallon of water to your well, but it's really dependent upon those factors. So knowing as much ahead of time about your well is really important. Having extra storage or having an alternate supply or power source, so that if you do lose power, you can get your pump back up and running, is really important, because if you're just depending upon electricity, you're going to have no water whatsoever if you don't have a storage tank. So those are the things to think about as you're preparing. Even if it's just a small storage tank, or you have a pressure tank, those will hold some water that you could use in an emergency.
Okay. Any other tips that you want to give out to people concerning food and water in the case of a power outage?
So just with food, again, making sure that whatever you're going to do is cold. You want to make sure you have a safe and stable food supply as well. So you want to have those backup means, much like Jeremy talked about, shelf-stable food, pantry, canned goods. You want to make sure you have a means to open those canned goods. So if you're dependent upon an electric can opener, you want to make sure you have a hand crank one that you can use. If you have paper plates or bowls, alternative means, so then you're not wasting the water that you do have to wash dishes. So it's, again, making sure you're safe. And you want to make sure that it's in an area that's accessible and secure. So you don't want it, on the floor if you're in a flood-prone area, or you don't want it tucked away in the basement where, unfortunately we just had those earthquakes, where you may not actually be able to access those emergency supplies, food supplies that you've had.
Yeah, it's really important. And again, take the time now. Don't wait until a disaster happens, because then it's going to be too late. And you can't predict these things.
You can't. So you always want to make sure you at least have something on hand to get you through those first few days, and then pay attention. Listen to where those shelters are at, what resources are available, and who's there to help you, because you're going to exhaust whatever supply you have at some point. So you need to prepare on where you can go next to get those restocked.
And if we're talking about listening to the news, you have to have a means to do that as well.
You do. So I can't have a hand crank radio in my car that I keep there for those purposes. So, making sure that you have a radio that can get at least your local channels, have batteries for it. Make sure that it works and it's programmed, and again, that it's in that accessible space for you to use, excuse me.
Okay, and we're talking about this again all month because September is National Preparedness Month. And if you go to kget.com/disaster, you're going to find a lot of resources there, checklists and phone numbers and all kinds of information. And then next Thursday, same time, same place at kget.com, we're going to be talking about Smart 911, a great way to be notified in case of a disaster in your area, how to sign up and make sure that all of your information is up to date. But again, September is National Preparedness Month, and we really just want to make sure that you and your family are ready in case and when a disaster or a power outage in this case strikes. So Amy, thanks for joining us. Thank you to all of our guests for joining us today, and thank you for watching, and we'll see you again next Thursday.